So we'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Particularly, we're grateful to Janet Max, who doesn't want to be recognized, but she makes all this work. So thanks, Janet. And especially to Paul and Diane Jones, of course, who make this all possible. Paul and Diane sponsor the PAUSE-Link series. So if you haven't seen them, you can thank them when you see them. A new announcement we have today, and that is we have finally, after 10 years, hired an executive director for the Center for Positive Organization Scholarship. Chris White has just come on board. So Chris, so people know you. Thanks for doing that. Now I'm grateful to be able to introduce Dean Eisner, and Dean is then going to introduce the rest of the panel for us. Dean has been an enormous supporter of the University of Michigan and an example, a role model of POS. So Dean is recently retired president and CEO of Mannheim, an automotive services company. Previous to that, he was a vice president of Cox Enterprises. Cox has businesses all over the world, and I know them as a media company, but they've got lots of other places, lots of other businesses than that. And Dean, while at Cox, was in charge of strategic planning, mergers and acquisitions, corporate marketing, and new media. How's that for a product portfolio, job description? Currently serves on a number of boards of directors, but I loved it. Last Friday, Dean gave just a little quick blurb in a dinner that was held here at the university for scholarship donors, people who create scholarships for students at the university, and particularly through the business school. And Dean was asked to come and be one of 2 or 3 people who just represented those donors. And I just loved it, because he said something like this. Now, you can correct me, Dean. He got his undergraduate at Purdue and his MBA at Michigan. And he said, I give 10 times more money to Michigan than I do to Purdue, because this is sort of got my heart. This is the place where he's on fire. And he sort of exudes that sort of spirit. So we're so grateful, Dean, you're here and that you're willing to do this today. And you'll notice that his topic and the kind of life he lives is very typical of this sort of passionate commitment. So I'll let you take it away. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks. Well, hi. So the one thing that I said at the dinner was one of the reasons why I give so much is because I continue to get educated at the University of Michigan. I may be retired, and the past 10 or 15 years working with Kim and Jane Dutton and a whole host of people at this school, I feel like I get continuing education, and it's such a great investment. So that was one of the reasons why I love this place so much. Our topic is going to be a really interesting one, because I think it applies to a lot of people, and what you've got is a bunch of people that really, really have believed, and I think continue to believe, that passion plays a really important part in your career. I think we have some challenges, though, and that's one of the dialogues that we want to have today is, well, when does reality come in and you just can't always follow your passion? And so I think there's going to be an interesting dynamic. The panel, their profiles I think you've had available, so we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about their background. I will briefly introduce them, and then they're going to take 2 minutes and explain why passion is part of what they do. But they've asked me to actually put the first question to you, and that is, we wanted to find out who's here. So if you are a faculty member or staff, can you raise your hand so we can... Wow. Okay. We're going to get educated. If you are a student, and if you are a member of the community, business or community involved. Great. So almost split pretty well. So I'm going to start with myself. I'm going to share with you that as a CEO of a company that had 35,000 employees, I truly believed that I needed to move people into positions where they cared about their jobs. And if they didn't, then they weren't going to do a very good job. And that went all the way to the hourly workers who you say, oh, you can't have any influence on people that are doing mundane jobs. And in fact, a lot of the writing that comes out of positive organizational scholarship, which is why I really, really have attached to that department, says, no, you can and you should. And you should try to find a way. So it was really kindred spirit. So that's the way I believed we should manage, and it's the way that I lived my own career. A lot of people ask me, hey, how did you design your career so you could be a CEO? And I said, I never did. I always just did jobs that I really got into, and I read a book 20 years ago called Flow. I think the successor to Flow is probably Dan Pink's Drive, and a lot of the papers that come out of this institution that are quoted in both of those. And so I really believed I needed to follow my passions and the things that I cared about. And that's how I excelled. And I always felt that if I didn't, then I probably needed to move on. Because if I wasn't really enjoying what I was doing and I wasn't getting fulfillment from it, then I should try something else. So with that, we have some really interesting people that have a view of this kind of philosophy as well. Blair is from Acumen Fund and is a leader in social venturing, and maybe we'll just do one at a time. So you are now on.
So I'm saying why passion is important.
Yeah. And you can tie it to your job as well.
Well, then it absolutely ties. So I actually have to say I've been very fortunate in my life that I have never really had a job that I didn't absolutely love. I had sort of a non-traditional, as they told me at business school, I had a non-traditional career path, living sort of all over the world and experiencing cultures and businesses and opportunities. And I think for me it was, once I had that ability to sort of grow and to learn and certainly to self-reflect on my own experiences, it became very clear to me what I'm passionate about and what I'm not. And when I was in a role where I was passionate about it, much like Dean, there was no question that I was going to excel. I mean, the drive, the innate drive to do better and to grow and to build is tremendous. And I think that also radiates to all the people you're working with, which I think is so important, and Dean mentioned it as well, is that when you are passionate about what you're doing, everyone around you wants to have that same passion. And I think that's how you build amazing organizations and inspire people to sort of fulfill their human potential. So that's me.
So if you haven't read Blair's bio, she is with Acumen Fund, really undertaking the leadership. And Acumen Fund, if you hadn't seen, cover of Forbes magazine 2 months ago with the head and founder of it, and really doing amazing social work to solve some of the issues. So it's both business and social venturing together. It's really an amazing operation. Very.
Do you want me to give a quick action? Well,
Sure.
I'll just quickly, we're nonprofit venture capital, which many would say don't go together, but we believe that opposing ideas should go together. So we essentially raise money from philanthropists, and then we take that capital and we make debt and equity investments in businesses that serve the poor. So essentially it's trying to flip charity on its head, saying that for so long, giving charity away, we haven't made the progress I think we would have hoped we would have made. But if you use the market as a tool to listen to the poorest people in the world, in fact, giving them a choice and a perspective by using business, we could, in fact, change the way that development functions and hopefully, change the world if we're thinking at a high level.
So next is Matteo. Matteo is a student here. He has shared that he has actually had a desire to use all of his skills in banking. I'm not so passionate about banking, but he is. And so he's going to share a little bit about how all of his experiences have come together prospectively in looking at his next venture after he graduates into the banking area.
Yeah, so hi everybody. I'm a second year MBA student here, and I found in banking, I found a link between my passion and my career in investment banking. I know it sounds kind of strange, but basically when I was living in Italy before, and my dream was to work on Wall Street, and for me it was like impossible to realize this dream, because I was like, oh my God, I'm so far away, I'm living in another country, and there were too many things that like for me were like super difficult. So I just followed my passions. I knew that I could realize this dream by following my main objective, which was, first of all, realize my academic. I wanted to develop my academic skills, and then move to the United States and hope to find the right way. And I was never discouraged. I always believed in myself, in my strengths, and it's kind of interesting, because my view of investment banking is not only a cold and analytical place. I tried to bring something different to investment banking this summer. I tried to talk to as many people as possible, to be very open, and I tried to connect also departments that sometimes we're not really talking to each other, and it really worked in the way that I met, I would say, the whole M&A group at Citi in New York, and a lot of other different groups. I connected to the whole summer associate class. But just being myself, like just being open and friendly with everybody, and of course I was being professional, and I was delivering an excellent job. But I really believe that if you follow your passion, you can achieve whatever you want, no matter where you are in the world. That's my view.
So Leslie is in the career services area, and she really develops relationships with people that are looking for social, cause-related work and entrepreneur work. And so Leslie, why don't you?
Thank you. I'm Leslie, and I've always been obsessed with the questions, who am I and what am I meant to do on this earth? So it's worked out quite well for me to get my training in counseling psychology and work here at the business school as a career counselor, working with some of the most confused groups of students, some of them who are here today, who are trying to come up with an equation of how they can intersect their passions and their realities. And so what the methodology that I use in my counseling and my coaching of students is really deep in self-assessment, as you can imagine, taking multiple instruments and looking at the overlays and doing a lot of coaching and deep questions and discussions for people so they can pull these things out of themselves. It's not immediately apparent for people, and it's something that really develops over time and changes. It's not something that just exists only inside of you. It's something that comes out based on certain experiences that you live in your life. And so it's part knowing yourself, and that's certainly the foundation. But then it's also partly getting out in the world and experiencing things so you can interact with that and figure out where the flow really comes from and do more of that.
And then finally, Shirley is a professor here and has written a number of really well thought out papers and insight, and done a lot of analysis on actually the data that goes with having passionate careers. And so, Shirley?
So I'm very passionate about negotiation, and it has to do with how I grew up in multiple countries, never really belonging in any one place, and having always to really negotiate constantly to figure out the social norms and the people and how you get what you need. In some countries you negotiate more than others, and I was very curious about that, and experimenting with different careers, I realized that one of the main drivers for me was something that I wouldn't feel like within a year or a business cycle I figured out 97% of what I have to learn. And wanting to always continue to learn and being very familiar with academics, since my father's also a professor actually here at the University of Michigan, I decided to pursue an academic career, thinking about it in actually a non-intuitive way, because I grew up thinking that success in academia was striving for the Nobel Prize in whatever field you're in, and I know most of us aren't able to do that. So really from a perspective of how do you make an impact in a certain area, and how do you help people to achieve excellence? And I've been able to also be very fortunate to work with a lot of students in the different degree programs and open programs that we have, taking a very personal perspective, not just teaching them negotiation strategies in general, but thinking about how your personal journey develops and how can you impact it through social interactions, because careers are socially embedded. We're always interacting with other people. We don't always think about these as negotiations, but the more we can be strategic about some of these interactions, the more we can create value together. And creating value is sometimes about trade-offs, but not necessarily compromising. So what if I could get 100% of what I wanted and you could as well? What kind of innovative social process do we need to engage so that I can really achieve what I'm looking for, be passionate about it, and have impact? And recently we've written an article about developing and pursuing a career with a heart. And what does that take? What does it mean to really enjoy, care, value, and have balance with the rest of your life? What if I could have it all? How do I do that? How do I negotiate that?
So here's the interesting turn. Obviously, you got 5 people here that believe in passion and their careers, and we're all positive people, and we're happy. But when we were putting this panel together, the discussion actually wasn't about our views. It was about how real is this? Because economically right now there's a lot of challenges. And so can you really have that in an economic environment that we're in? Is this for real? Is it elitist? Is this only for some people? Do some people have the latitude to select their careers while other people really can't put that ingredient in? So that's what we want to kind of mix it up with, because you certainly have some biased people here towards positive approaches and passion. But I think the interesting thing is going to be when we get in a dialogue with you and the questions that come that challenge maybe pieces of this. And I think you got some people that deeply believe, and it'll be interesting to see how credible you feel some of the issues are for today and how much it applies. And we like that. We like that dialogue. But first, we wanted to give an exercise. So we're going to take you way back and ask you to do something. Go into your baskets. Everybody get an index card. And we'd like you to, on one side of the index card, to write the job or the career that you wanted when you were growing up. What was your first career passion? And then on the other side, we'd like you to write, what is your career passion now? Once you have it done, take a couple of minutes and share it with your tables. Everybody go around the table and share what your growing up passion was and what your passion is now for your career. What's that? What you wanted to be when you were growing up? What you like to be?
What's that? What's the second one?
What you want to be now? What's your new career passion? Yours, I know what yours is. Could be. That's what I wanted to find out. So again, just again, on one side of the card is what you wanted to be when you were growing up, and the other side is what you want to aspire to be now. No, that's going to be the point. So everybody done? You had enough conversation? No? I'll give you 2 more minutes. Oh no. Oh, that's a mess. Okay. So, here's my first question to y'all. Who had the same thing on the front and the back of the card? We had one? Somebody over here? There's one. Matteo, didn't you have one? Yeah. Okay, what happened? What happened between the front of the card and the back of the card? The world intervened. Experience in getting to know yourself. Exposure to other ideas. I'm just repeating it so everyone can hear. Fear. Oh boy, we got a ringer. We're going to get back to you on that one. Family pressure. Mentorship. So the ability to actually achieve that. To get.
Well, I'm old enough that when I was a kid, even though my mom was really into equality, when she talked about work, it was like something to fall back on if you needed it. And so career was not my main focus when I was a kid. I was going to be a mom.
So this was actually opportunity that kind of opened up. The others? So I guess the next question is, does anybody regret that they're not what's on the front of the card? So the evolution that took place from the front of the card to the back of the card was an okay one, right? It was... There's a lot of nodding going, absolutely. I want to be a gas station attendant, and I'm so glad I'm here. So maybe we should explore, I'm going to throw it up into the panel and everyone here too. What do y'all think happened? We had some input here from the evolution of this idea. Was there any, and I'm going to go to you, Leslie, because you said it when we were sitting here, do you think that there were some germs of ideas that were in the front part of the card that are still with us? It may not be that job or that career, but there were elements of it that are still with you. And so it was an evolution. It wasn't just a right turn.
Well, raise your hand. If you feel like there's a linkage in some way, you can make the linkage between the front and the back. I think for many people, it isn't a hard right turn. There's seeds of something. For example, what I had written on mine was talk show host, Diane Sawyer or Oprah. And although I'm not doing that, some days I get to. Last Friday I gave a workshop and I got to interview somebody on TV and make a video and show that for students. So in some ways, it's not so far off.
Anybody else share some of the linkages from the front to the back?
When I was a junior in high school, I wrote a paper about gender and language, and I just am doing a workshop at Yale at the end of the month on women and gender and language and those issues, and it was fun when I said, oh, I was interested in this when I was in high school. Yeah.
Anybody else? Janet? So how's that working now?
Very clear to me is how important creativity is. So the creativity to have my own enterprise, to be able to work creatively in teaching and coaching, mentoring others. So that I would say that's probably central to why that.
It's interesting. I don't know how many of you saw the news report on James Cameron, that he's going to go 7 miles deep into the ocean. A couple of you have seen that. And the news report was really interesting because he's got this fascination. He's a movie maker, but he's got this fascination with water and going in submersibles. And they showed a picture of him when he was 11 years old with his first submersible. And then, of course, he does Titanic. And, and he did a couple of other films about being under the water. And so somewhere in that youth, he's kind of flowing it through even now. So now he can afford to build something to go 7 miles down. So good on him. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about, I had jet pilot and entrepreneur, which are pretty similar. But I think, it's interesting we're saying, like, following your passion. I've had multiple passions in my life, and I've heard from a lot of young people, which is, I don't know what my passion is. And there's this fear around actually not knowing your passion. And I thought when I was really young, I was an athlete, and I thought that was it. So, that was the only thing I could be in the world, was this great athlete. And then I transitioned to actually being a writer and doing English, and then I transitioned to other things. And I think it's important to recognize that you could have multiple passions throughout your life that can be expressed in professional careers or whatever they are. And so it just got me thinking as we were talking about, like, is there one passion? There certainly isn't. And just wanted to sort of make that observation. I feel like it could open up the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, because I guess I want to kind of get at it. How many of you believe kind of the philosophy that you should have passion about your work? I mean, is that pretty simplistic? So I'm going to flip it and say, how many of you believe that actually passion is a small component because there are other elements that should play. So, yeah. So implied in what you're saying is that if you follow your passion too much, you may never get there, right? So why does that happen? What do you think happens, that they're just blinded by this passion and they don't, or is it?
I think there's an embedded value in that statement that your life can't have fulfillment unless you make a certain amount of income or secure a certain status in society. And I'm not sure that's the right premise to start from. If somebody's really happy being a waiter and being an actor and they have freedom to do other things and that it's fulfilling to them, that's important too, because not everybody can be, an executive or, really, really successful. And so I don't know. I think that's just something we need to keep in the back of our mind is what is our personal threshold? Where can we be content? Because we don't all have to make millions of dollars.
So let me see if I can get the two of you kind of see if I got what y'all are saying and then throw it here. There may be a measurement, is what you're saying, that's maybe ill-placed in saying that following your passion to be an actor and being a waitress or a waiter is so bad, because maybe you're happy and maybe the measurement is not how much income you're making as long as you're happy doing that. And so maybe that person is content. Maybe our judgment of them is they're not successful enough, but they may be quite content with it. Is that what you're saying? And that's okay.
I'll give a very explicit example. So I recently lived in a community in northern New Mexico called Taos, and there's not a very solid economic infrastructure there. The jobs that exist are bartending, waiting tables, and working at a cafeteria predominantly.
2 seconds. Can y'all hear her? Can we get the microphones? Sorry, I just want to make sure you're heard.
So the first thing that I said was that there's a implicit value implied when you say that that maybe they shouldn't. If you're just a waiter and a half-rate actor, that you have somehow not succeeded in your life or in your career, and that assumes that you have to either reach a certain status within society or make a certain amount of income to actually have fulfilled your passion. And I think that that's a dangerous slope to tread. The second point that I wanted to make was that the community that I lived in prior to here, Taos, New Mexico, is a community full of artists, writers, and innovators, actually. And a lot of people move out there so that they can enjoy a certain quality of life in the outdoors, but they're also innovators, and there's a lot of new green building techniques that are being tried out there. They do their art on the side, but maybe they bartend or they work at the ski area. And I actually think there's innovation occurring there because they're not so focused on having corporate jobs that society deems are valuable or a sign of success. And there have been architectural revolutions that are occurring out there, and it's been a hotbed for artists such as Georgia O'Keeffe and different writers over the last 100 years. So I don't know, I think it's something that you have to make a personal judgment of what is more important to you, and if you want power or status or wealth, that's okay, that's what motivates you, and that is part of your passion, but there's this whole other set of externalities that come with not being so focused on that.
Do you want to respond? I mean, I don't think she's debating. I just wanted to know if she's, I think, working off of your comment.
I think it's a good point. It's kind of what I was saying about, I don't agree with it. It's more to do with what you want to do with what you want to be. People, young people, I talk about, focus on what they want to be and not thinking about what they'll be doing. And with any career, I think you want to look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And then you can try to fit passion into your life in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah. Somebody here had their hand up. I'm going to be Montel now.
So getting back to the question of why, when there's a gap between, what you're passionate about and fulfilling that, well, why it may not be, or what might be getting in the way. A lot of things came to mind. I mean, one, taking the starving artist or actor idea. Sometimes people have passions for things that they're actually not that talented at. That they love it, but they're not really that talented. And that yet there are ways to. Maybe they are not the ones that are going to make it big in that field, but they can do community theater or some such and still be fulfilled. So sometimes there are ways, even if you're not super talented, to integrate that into your life and to have more fulfillment. That's one. Sometimes people have a lot of passion and they have a lot of talent, but somehow there is a subconscious limiting belief that they can actually fulfill that and they can be successful, and that can get in the way. So that can be, that you don't understand why it is that they aren't at the top of their field, but there is something internally that's gotten in the way, some programming and so on. And then, some people have the belief and they've got the talent, they've got it all going, but they actually aren't strategic or put the right effort in how do I actually make this happen. And so those are all some other factors that.
So this is great because I'm looking peripherally over at Shirley, and she's not stood up yet, but I know she wants to. So Shirley.
Okay. Well, I think these are really good comments. First of all, just bouncing on what you've said, I mean, my favorite career, I think I had the most fun when I was a waitress. And if I think about the elements of that job, it was about interacting with a lot of people, and I saw it as a way to make their day better. How, in a very short interaction, do I impact them? Right? I wasn't just serving food. So a lot of it is how you see what you're doing, and if it's a means to an end, or if you actually are, thinking about what you're going to do, right? And then finding the gems in it, right? Not necessarily knowing what you're passionate about before you start. Sometimes you just have to go into a job and negotiate within it to find your way. So I think it's a very complicated question, and I don't think it's about one passion or knowing and striving towards that one North Star necessarily. For some people it is, but not for everyone.
But before I want to ask anyone on the panel about the competency question. Mm-hmm. Because there's a question here about, there's passion. What if you're incompetent in doing it? So, this is great. I want to be a rock and roll star, and you're pretty lousy at guitar. So
one question is it a hobby or is it your job, right? You can be very passionate about music, but most of us aren't good enough to be concert pianists. But we could, right? So going with what you said, it's about being strategic, about understanding what parts of the things you're passionate about fit the career and what parts fit a hobby. In my mind, that's one example.
So if I'm getting you right, you're basically saying, look, passion's great, but you got to have reality built in about how competent you are for that passion.
Especially in a culture that's about being number one, right? So we can't all be number one.
And to take that a step further, I would say that you need to reality test your passions multiple times over and truly look for feedback and then accept that feedback, because we all have delusions about what we're great at. And I think it's really important to get real-time feedback from people and from the evaluation of the work that we've done and the relationships that we have to get and accept that and move towards where our natural talents are.
I think Ed.
I think there was a really useful point that you almost made when you said my best job was being a waitress. And I did that because I wanted to make people's day better. You took your passion into a particular job, and given who you were, you probably could have taken that similar passion into a number of other jobs.
Well, I wanted to make money to travel, so it was, it was a part-time job, but I found a way to love it. So in that sense, it's just an example of you can find something in what you're doing, and it depends on the mindset you're in. You can just plow through the day and serve food, and that's going to be a very dull and difficult day. I mean, my days flew, but I was able to reframe what I was doing in a way that fits what I'm passionate about, and I feel like I was lucky that even in kind of the dreary kind of jobs that I had, I still had fun.
I mean, I think passion without discipline and humility, I think could be potentially self-centered to a certain degree. I think I sometimes worry about this new generation of young people who are just, I have to find my passion. It's all about me. Mostly it's more Western than I think non-Western phenomena. But I have to figure out what's right for me. I have to figure out my passion in life. And I think it can become very dangerous in some ways. And so I do think that coming to this competency question, a lot of these other questions, that like bringing in discipline, and most people who I find are passionate about what they do. If we are linking it to career, because I think we could also just go off on the passion question in general, but if we're linking it to career, it's also the passion for a sense of a higher purpose, and that not, it could be religious, it could be a sense of community, it could be a sense of family, whatever it is. I find that brings discipline and certainly brings humility to recognize what you can and can't bring to the table. Just a few thoughts.
I have something to say, going back to David's point, actually. I really think that if you are aware of your passions and you adapt them to the situation or the job, then you are successful. Because I love networking. If I was a waiter, I could be a great networker with clients, right? I'm doing investment banking, and I can apply, this passion to my clients. So I love, talking to them and meeting new clients and like developing new businesses for my company. So I don't know, I love learning. If I was a waiter, I don't know, I could learn how to serve clients faster, or if I was a cook, how to cook different dishes. But if you work, I don't know, in consulting, maybe you want to learn something else. So if you are really aware of what your passions are, and then you manage to also kind of not change them, but shape them to the environment and the situation, I think you are successful. But some people have a lot of passions and they don't know how to shape them, how to adapt them to the context, So that's not going to work. I mean, I love music, and I knew when I was 10 that I couldn't be successful as a musician. So I kept on collecting CDs and buying vinyls and, all these collectibles from all over the world. But that's something that I keep outside, like it's not my job. I know that like my other passions are analytical, I love data analysis, for example. I love networking. I love to learn. I have different passions, and I know what they are. So when I came to business school, I was like, what should I do in my life? Like I knew I wanted to work in banking, but then consulting was also a choice that like appealed to me, right? I was like, well, maybe it's nice too. Then I networked, with different people, with bankers, with consultants, and I realized that the analytical work, like all the Excel spreadsheets and stuff, is stronger in banking, for example. And then I went towards banking. But my career dream was international businessman. It was really vague, like I didn't have an idea of like exactly where. Like I saw myself with a hand luggage, 24-hour luggage.
Matteo and I are not alike. Mine was James Bond. He wants to be an international businessman. But
yes, and then when growing up, I I define location, which kind of business, So I think for me, life was more of a understanding where I wanted to be and like how and all the different variables.
So there were a lot of hands up.
The thing I wanted to do, I'm doing, but I'm not making money at it. But that's okay because I make sure I don't work much, so I've got a lot of free time. However, one of the things, as you touched on, a lot of people now seem to be more self-centered. And if you've ever met any kids who had two professional parents and they feel like nobody's ever there, what I'm curious about is those people, we're kind of a self-selected group here. We're passionate about what we do for work. However, how many people here feel there's some other parts of your life that, whether it be relationships or kids or something else, that you'd like to have passion, but you've decided since it's easier to find it in work, that's where you're focused? How many other parts of your life are you passionate about, or just kind of saying, well, I'm going to immerse myself in work because I can be successful and I get money and I get accolades, but when I go home, my significant other just gives me a hard time.
Actually, one of the things just because you have an opportunity to do something, it doesn't mean that's going to make you happy, right? So when I was younger, I wanted to be a partner in a consulting firm, which is fantastic. And wow, I think I could do this. I think I have the ability. And it took me a while to realize just because I maybe could, I don't know, doesn't mean that was the right choice, because there's so many other factors in life. So I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a member of a community, I'm a volunteer. I wasn't willing to trade all that in to say, did I get my one career passion? Maybe I could have, I don't know. But that wasn't right for me. And I'm just thankful I could realize that early enough to be able to change, because I've known people that have just gotten too far into it and not realized until later that, wow, I got what I allegedly wanted, and was it really what did I trade? So just realizing that life is a trade-off, and we probably have a lot of passions in our lives, and making sure it's the right mix of them so we don't end up at the end of the day going, I got what I thought I wanted. Was it really, what did I trade in?
So we have a third of the people in the room are students. Students. Somebody raise their hand.
So I think it's interesting that there aren't, in at least my judgment of the crowd, there aren't too many BBA students here. And at least the perception I get of the BBA culture here at Ross is a lot of students will feel like such pressure to achieve really high grades, which actually prevents them from pursuing things they're truly passionate about. So, for example, I've met a lot of students who are passionate about pursuing entrepreneurial projects on the side. However, even just coming to an event like this, something that would take an hour and a half of their time, I think too often, especially younger students who may be fearful, will just react towards the incentive of a grade, and that will prevent them from pursuing their passions in other things. And I think that the way we structure our schools is actually a problem, and it prevents a lot of young people from pursuing their passions and allows for reality to set in.
Okay, well, I may not be invited back to the school when I do this. Other students, are there students who feel that you are taking courses, or not, better word it, not taking courses that you really want in pursuit of making sure that you get the requirements done and the grades that you need to get, and you're not following that? Is that a little bit of what you're saying?
I don't know if it's necessarily the courses that we're taking, but I think the culture has been to, as a junior, after you're junior, you have to get an internship through the business school that's, high paying and whatever. And I think people sort of give up on the dreams that they have that are technically non-traditional, often because they feel the pressure to get their internship before, February or whatever, because all your friends are getting internships, so you don't want to wait until March or summer or whatever to pursue the things that you want to, just because you feel the pressure. that's sort of the culture that I have seen. But I also think that it gives great opportunities to other people who do want to pursue those dreams as well.
Got one. I just want to take some students first before we go back. We have one here. And then, Leslie, you all ready for this?
All right. As a student interested in entrepreneurship, interested in a lot of these different things, business school, I've almost felt like I've been an anomaly, right? Because I don't do recruiting, I don't do that kind of thing yet. I can still try and go after the things that I love. And I think what gets missed in translation a lot of time is it's not the position you're going for, it's not the company you're going for, it's the people that you're going to be working with, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're at an internship at some kick-ass company, but your supervisor doesn't care about you, it's going to be a terrible experience, right? I think what students miss a lot of the time is that you have to place yourself out there if you actually want to be in a position to get something that you want, right? If you want to meet people in a certain industry, take a day off class, right? Go there, say, hey, I just want help. And I just want to know what's going on in your industry. I just want to get to know you a little better. And just that element of being genuine and actually going out there and putting yourself in a position to be open to these opportunities is something that we don't get a lot of exposure to through formal schooling. It's not really something that anybody ever tells you to go do. It's something you absolutely have to go get yourself out there and meet some great people who will support you all along the way.
Well, I'm going to let Leslie respond, but I'm actually going to share something with you. The reason why I'm here, the reason why I come back to this school is because of that. I come back here because there's something that's not necessarily you're going to get in the classroom. It is the idea that you have to make some value decisions for yourself. And those value decisions are who you're going to work for. And you need to evaluate it. Because I made a terrible mistake that I will embrace and I will keep for my life, that I made by making a decision on a job that sounded like the right job. It was beautiful. And I was sharing with Blair last night. It was working for a crook. And it was awful. And it was the greatest job in the world. And it was sexy, and it was high paid, and it was exactly what I wanted to do. And I worked for a crook. And I kind of convinced myself it was okay. I didn't know he was a crook at the time. I just knew that he maybe not exactly the most straightforward person. And it was a miserable situation. So there is something cultural about what you do as well that you need to look at. I'm going to throw it back to Leslie, and then I see a couple of hands here.
So people come to business school for all kinds of reasons. But Mateo, why would you say that most students come to business school, at least for the MBA?
To get a career that they want.
Yeah, so most people are motivated to come back, switch careers. They look through admissions books. They see the names of companies like McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, and they think, okay, well, I'm gonna pick a school that provides the career opportunities that I may want for my future. Even if I don't quite know who McKinsey is at this point, I'll have some time to figure it out during those 2 years. Then you get to school, and 2 weeks after class starts, these companies start coming around. And your classmates start going to the presentations, and you get sucked in. And that can be a great thing for people who have accurately evaluated what it is that they want to do. And people who can withstand some of the social pressures and even in the internal pressures. Am I crazy for not checking out consulting and what that is? For a lot of people, they can make that decision, and they make a great decision. Like Mateo going into investment banking, it's truly it's an authentic choice for him. But there's a lot of pressure to make choices that aren't authentic, and it's a tough container to hold, being the Office of Career Development, because we are an Office of Career Development. We're not a placement office, though people like to see it that way. And so we're an office where people can unfold their careers and explore different things. And as part of that, we offer on-campus recruiting. But we also highly support the off-campus search, which is something that not everyone is aware of.
So if I can ask, do you have any thoughts, Damien, you want to share? No? Okay. Well, I think we have this gentleman, and then I'm going to come back to you.
Okay, I wanted to give maybe a little perspective. It's interesting how this is being framed here. we're framing this in terms of really basically American culture. Highly individualistic, highly focused on what we want. If, I've worked in 10 different countries, and this would be anathema to a lot of people, to be so focused on self and not be willing to do what your family wants you to do or needs to do or what your community expects of you. I just wanted to put that as perspective, that we have a lot of people who come here from all over the world, and one of the things that happens when they go home is people think they've changed in some very fundamental ways. They no longer care about their family. They're more concerned about their own ambition, their own achievement. I just want to give that perspective because this is a culture that we're participating in here, and it's only one of many different ways. But the highly individualistic, make it on your own, strive and drive and make it, is very, this is typically American culture. It's not the way the whole world works.
Here's our non-American.
It's great.
Yeah, I think Bruce, right? Raises a great point. I'm a second-year student in the MBA program, and I think this conversation is extremely relevant in kind of some of the experiences I've gone through, right? Coming from a corporate background, interning in a corporate environment, but also having experiences outside of that that have moved me into the non-traditional space. So actually making that journey as you come in, and actually for me having the same process of having to reframe how I think about myself. And I think to many people's point in terms of what is my passion, what are things that I care about. And I think, if we're being fairly objective evaluators of what is the purpose of an organization like a business school, right? It has customers, it has products, which are the students much more than it is, this is not a life school to get people necessarily find out what their passion is in life. And not saying that it should or shouldn't be, but I think it's just reconciling how countercultural this is in this environment. And to your point, just having come back from Argentina and different places where it's a entirely different culture, and it's okay to be a little bit more kind of laid back, take life in a different vein. And I think, as we kind of have this conversation about, passion and competence, for me it's a question of, I think certainly when you're thinking, if we're asking the question about professional occupation, competence has a much bigger component than if we're thinking about the question of personal passion. It's a different story. When we do these exercises, you reflect back, what do I want to write on my obituary and those things. And very rarely do you find, I was a partner at some firm on there, right? It's the things that are much more visceral, that are much more emotional, and have those components. So, and for me, it's one of the things that's kind of not been talked about here is the component of faith that comes in as we talk about passion and where that kind of what people anchor themselves to. So from my perspective, one of the biggest thing for me is I think it's all the story of knowing yourself, right? The more you understand who you are, what you stand for, and what those things are, it allows you to be able to make those conscious trade-offs to recognize when you're in a culture that your values don't necessarily line up with, you're going to be countercultural, and being okay with that. And I think that's the biggest challenge. As you look, especially for BBAs that are in a much more GPA-driven environment when it comes to occupation, but when it comes to more of a passion environment, right, it's a entirely different evaluation system and how you figure that out. So I'm not necessarily trying to answer the question, but just advancing the conversation forward in terms of, I think it's still about that know thyself and what trade-offs are you unwilling to make or willing to make to get whatever you care most about.
That's great comments. These are all great comments. Yeah. This gentleman right here, I think, is next.
As we look at, to contextualize what Bruce and Blair said, if we go back to the writings of Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, they talk about happiness. Why do we do it? Why does mankind do what mankind does? And if to oversimplify it, we do things for ourselves or we do things for others in a very simple manner. And as we go into organizations and try to help them clarify what they look like when they're at their very, very best, we find that passion is one of the guiding principles many companies want as a guiding principle. And then when we go to ask them to tell stories about what does it look like when you're at your best, boy, it gets quite contrasting between me winning for me and me winning for others. And we're very confused about what passion means in that company. So, in context of what purpose do we use passion, as Blair was saying?
I have a lot of thoughts. I feel like
I know.
we're covering a lot of things. So, one of the things I wanted to respond to the entrepreneurial career path, or non-traditional, because that was definitely my path. And for the people in the room who are pursuing that path, I just wanted to make a few comments and maybe pieces of advice. I think that when I was very young, I took a lot of risks. I moved abroad. I did things that, for example, I'm graduating from undergrad, and I applied for Teach for America and did not get in and had no backup plan. So I Googled Teach Abroad on Google, and someone at the other end was living in a small town in South Korea and said, "You want to come teach here?" And I was like, "Sure." So I fly to South Korea 2 weeks later, and I'm sitting in the airport, and no one's there to pick me up, and the lights turn off in the airport, and I'm sitting there like terrified. And then this white van pulled up with these 3 Korean men, and I get in, and I end up having this amazing year and a half in South Korea. But what that did for me, and that year was this year of self-reflection. I was the only foreigner in this village for a while, but it increased my tolerance for risk, to do things that no one else was doing, and it proved to me that I had a resilience that, gosh, if I could make it in that situation, I could make it in other situations. And so when I got to business school, I had a very different perspective on the world, because I wasn't as scared to take these types of risks, whereas people who had sort of followed a traditional career path, better or worse, or was their path, I found that they were so scared, if I do this, I'm going to not make enough money, or if I do this, I'm not going to get the right job. And so I would encourage those who do want to do an entrepreneurial career path to take risks and take them early, because it proves to you that you can sort of continue on that path. And then, I think to this point on humility and trying to think about that passion needs to be connected to something bigger than, I believe that, bigger than yourself. And I think that's when you know how to lead from behind, you know how to empower others around you, when it's not just the self-driven, I have to be in front of the stage and this is my passion, but that it comes from something bigger, so that you can empower others around you if you're really looking to create change. So, that's my thoughts.
There you go.
I just had 2 thoughts. One was somebody had talked about the focusing on what you want to do rather than what you want to be. And a lot of us do things that didn't exist when we were kids. So I work as a coach. When I was a kid, that would have meant like baseball or something like that. And that's not what I do. So I think the focus on what you do rather than what you want to be is really good, in terms of the world changes really fast. And what you are going to be may not exist today. And then the other thing I wanted to just say was, someone had talked about the issues of working out being a parent with being with career. And I think that people tend not to speak to those issues as much with young people as maybe they should. And I certainly coach a lot of women where there's a lot of struggles around those 2 passions for them. And I certainly know that I've made choices to, at some points in my life, focus on, I said when I was a kid I wanted to be a mom. And as a mom with young kids, that was more of my focus than career. And now as my kids are older, my career is getting bigger. But I think that's a really important thing to think about for both men and women.
Can you just hand it out? And I'll get you.
I have 2 points to build on that. The first is a Michigan story for all of you students. From the time I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a teacher. And I came to Michigan, English teacher specifically. So I came to Michigan. I had been an editor for the school newspaper. So, what do? You walk into the Michigan Daily. You get a job as a writer. It's pretty logical to me, so I did. And it was 1969. Everybody had long hair. I was very conservative. They took one look at me and they said, we're all filled. And I thought, but I was the editor of the newspaper, and they're dragging me along. They said, we have plenty of openings in the business department. I said, but I don't know anything about business. And I just was so, I guess shy that I just let them lead me to the business department. And I stayed at the Michigan Daily for 4 years in advertising. And in my career, I went on to teach for 4 years before we moved to Grand Rapids. And I'd say that I enjoyed teaching, but I don't think I really had a passion for it. I did have a passion for helping people in other ways, mentoring, specifically college students today. But I think that sometimes you can find your passion, quite randomly. And I think randomly I found this passion for business at the Michigan Daily, although I didn't know it at the time. It wasn't until I was a young mom and I met a woman in the business field who introduced me to public relations. And I ended up owning a PR firm. And the way I'd like to tie this in with what you mentioned about passions, I truly feel that there is a passion gene. My husband's going to be going, yes, there is a passion gene in some people that is bigger than in other people. So if some of you are sitting here thinking, some of these people sound very passionate and I don't feel quite as passionate as they are, I truly feel some people have a passion gene. I had a passion gene to be the best teacher I could be, the best business person I could be, the best community person I could be, giving to my community, the best mom, the best person at church, doing the best I could, the best spouse I could. So no matter what I did everything with passion. I was one of these people that wanted it all, and I figured out a way to make it work, by taking risks and really enjoying life to its fullest, but doing it and trying to have it all. So, when you think about making choices, I'm going to challenge some of you to say that some of you have that passion gene, and you can probably have multiple passions at the same time, both personal and professional.
So we have probably enough time for one or two more, and then I'm going to let our esteemed panel give kind of their closing thoughts, and then I'm going to try to do something that will be very difficult, and that's going to try to summarize if there's anything that we can actually kind of summarize from this. So that's our plan for the next couple of minutes, and you got the stage.
Okay, so I'm Paul, MB2 here, and I just want to make a reflection question to everyone here. So, has anyone here has the chance in a situation that you have to make a decision, make a choice, and then you have two different tracks, and then somehow you made the decision to go to the toughest one because somehow you was believing that something is going to happen, that something would be helpful for you. So that's for me the most important thing when it comes to passion, when it comes how much risk you have to assume in your life. I had a great conversation with Professor Timothy Falley here, and then we were talking about exactly entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial career, and how to do something that is different, not the regular path in the world today. And then at the end of the day, we agreed on that for you really to do the final step, the one that will make the difference, it's much more related to how much you believe in yourself, how much you believe that something is going to happen in terms of positive, and then you can see things come true. And to do that, you have really to silence everything that is outside your mind. You have really to not pay attention to what's outside. Then you can really focus on what it's really important to you and what you really believe on. For me, it comes back to faith and believe in yourself.
So last one, and then we'll go to wrap up.
I mean, I was also struck by how fear can get in the way of that, believing in oneself, and having that passion and being able to execute it, and also that some people by nature are more need more security. That's much more comfortable for them. So I think that people are all on a continuum that way, but I do think that the fear can get in the way of fulfilling whatever it is people want to accomplish.
So I'll share with you that we actually abandoned two exercises that we were going to do because the dialogue was so good. One of them was your index card was going to be on one side, what's your greatest fear, and on the other side was going to be what's your greatest regret. That was going to be one exercise, so you can do it on your own if you want. And the last exercise was actually going to be to take one of the cards and write your business card for your life, your future, the same thing that you do with your obituary, but kind of have a vision for where you want to be. And it was interesting when we were having a dialogue about it as a panel, it wasn't about your job. It was about where did you want to be. So it incorporated some of the thinking that said, I want to be a great mother, or I want to be a great social change agent. It didn't have to be necessarily a job. But those were the exercises that we actually decided to abandon because I think this was a more meaningful conversation than those might have been and might have interrupted the flow. I'm going to go backwards now, so maybe a minute each to kind of recap.
Well, there's a lot being said here, but I think where I'm thinking right now is about emotions and how actually some of the negative emotions can be motivating. So if you are fearful that you're not going to be able to have the impact you want, it may motivate you to work even harder. It may stymie some people so they don't move. So it's not so much about what emotions there are, but how you deal with them, whether you're mindful of them, and then your strategic choices that you make in order to harness them or overcome them to go where you want. And for that, you have to have a goal, and you have to be able to think about how you find that balance and how you negotiate all these relationships, whether they're at home, whether they're in your community, whether they are at work. And some people have this biggest passion that they always knew about, and some people are more people who find the passion where they're at. So I think there's lots of different ways, and from my perspective, from my worldview, all of these can be negotiated so that everybody can find a path, no matter what culture they're from, right? But, you know, if I value community, then my path is a much more collectivist and much more oriented towards a group. I have to be aware of that too. So it's really about what do I do in the situation that I'm facing given a certain culture, and try to find the best path possible at every point in time, and realize that some of the things are trade-offs that we make over time. But what if I could do it all now? What if I could have, you know, everything like we heard in terms of both the best in my family and my career at the moment? What would that look like? What kind of value creation risks can I take to be able to enable that opportunity and go for it?
And in 2 seconds, because each of the panelists is giving you also a gift. And why don't we at least describe what the gift is?
So an article that's just coming out in Organizational Dynamics called In Pursuit of a Career with a Heart. So I hope you find the ideas there helpful, motivating, reflecting on how they're going to help you in your next stage, your next step, whether it's on your own career path or as a mentor to people around you. And I really want to invite people to be more open about sometimes the things we stumbled on ended up opening doors, and it wasn't that we knew when we were 18 or when we graduated from college that we were going in a certain direction. So having those open conversations with people can be really enabling, and being honest and modest about yourself can actually enable growth in ways that are different from when I sell myself outside. So hopefully you'll find something in that article, and I'd love to hear from you, and my email is on the cover sheet.
And all those packets are, as you leave, there's baskets with the packets in them.
So rarely are people struck by a bolt of lightning that says, I know what I want to do. You know, the Mateos of the world are very rare, where they know right away. Most of us, I've heard the expression that it's more like walking towards an impressionistic painting, where, you know, from far away you can't really quite see what's going on, and the closer you walk, the more of it that you can get a grip of, and you just keep walking on that path closer. And I think that's how most of integrating our passion in our life unfolds for us. But my advice, I guess, would be to have these conversations be a regular part of your life. Don't let this be an intimidating topic that you avoid, because it's overwhelming to think about how you're going to, you know, set up your life perfectly so you have the perfect career trajectory. It doesn't happen that way. It's very messy. So don't avoid the topic. Engage with the topic in small, bite-sized ways. And that's where the sparks and the creativity happen. So my gift for you is a free self-assessment. It's called the VIA survey, and it's free to you. And so you'll see on the card that you can go and learn about your strengths of character.
On this note, by the way, I attended a great workshop that Leslie gave about strengths, and there is a survey that is called 5 Strengths. Strengths Finder, and when I did it, I was super surprised because I got my top 5 strengths were exactly how I was feeling like. So those that I said before, so analytical, love to learn, networking, and others. My advice to you guys is to know your passion and be aware of what they are and try to adapt them, as I said before, to different situations and context, because that's how you will be successful. Never give up, because if you want something, you can have it no matter what. You can come from the poorest background, you can come from the most difficult situation in life, but we have a great example of leaders that came from nothing and became the most powerful and happiest person in the world. So I truly believe that if you know yourself well and if you never give up, you will succeed. So my passion, my real fun passion is music. So I decided to give as a present a playlist of songs that I used to listen when I was younger, and they helped me during difficult times, especially when I was studying. I was in undergrad, and the only thing I saw was books, so I needed something to, enjoy. So I hope you guys like it, and thanks for coming.
So I'll start with my gift, which was the Acumen Fund Leadership Reading List, which is, as you will see, quite ambitious and covers Socrates and Plato and Mandela and King, as well as sort of social change agents. So I hope that you all read every single book on the list, but it really is a tool for self-reflection. So when you're asking things like, what is my view on human nature, and how does that actually impact the way that I lead people? Do I think they're selfish but innately good? These are really important questions to ask as a leader. Or how do I value community over efficiency or quality over liberty? So just, some of that comes out in the reading list, as well as information on sort of market-based solutions for social change. Then I guess closing comments would be, particularly, I guess, and I sense that many of you are sort of social change agents in the room, but I think we're at an incredible moment in time to rethink systems, to rethink the way we live our lives, the way that business functions, and I say that because we're in the business school. And we use this term a lot, moral imagination, but it's the humility to see the world as it is, but the audacity to envision it as it could be. And then I think to the competency point, and the skills to execute on that vision. And so I would like to see more people embrace that imagination piece. I think we're so fear-based right now that we're not thinking outside these systems. And so as you think about your career, your life, or your passion, whatever that may be, I hope that the imagination does play a role, because I think we can change a lot of systems right now. So that's my last piece.
So mine's going to be easy, because I think it was really covered. I think there is, from what I've heard from you and all the discussion, passion plays. I mean, there is a piece, regardless of culture, that passion plays in our success. Competency clearly is knowing yourself and what you're competent at is a really important ingredient for you to assess who you are, what your passions are, how you want to navigate your life in a holistic way, which is not just about the job that you take, but how you balance things out. And it's based on what risk tolerances you're willing to take and what paths that you're willing to cross, and to be real with yourself about what those are. And there needs to be something inside you, though, that's driving you if you want to be successful, particularly in this culture. And this culture is particularly effective in taking on social change and doing things. I mean, we're an amazing culture, and a lot of that has to do with our passions for doing things. And I just want to underscore that it's not necessarily about making widgets. You may decide, and I'm talking to the students now, you may decide that you want to do something that has a huge impact on society, and it's not just making more of the same. And I'm hearing a lot of that, and I think that's brilliant, because over time there's only so many razor blades that we can make, and there are only so many different things that we can make for consumption. We really do have a lot of things that will make a huge difference in addressing, and we should try to address those. So my gift to you was relatively simple. I live on the beach now, and I walk on the beach, and I'm just amazed at shells. And these were homes for living creatures. They've been abandoned, but I'm sure they've gone on to better homes. But they've left something that was absolutely beautiful in its construction. So I thought just the knowledge that you kind of move on from the one side of the card to the other, and it has an impact on you. That's why you have a seashell in the middle, and feel free to take those and do that. Thank you for being here. I think it was a great discussion.